Welcome to Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray. Zach is the founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors and is one of the nation's leading financial advisors, helping people answer some of retirement's biggest questions, covering topics like income, taxes, and Social Security.
So this is a place where we have to be really concerned about how much of this money am I going to keep?
Zach is here to make sure you can enjoy the retirement you deserve. This is Rooted in Retirement with Zach Gray.
Inflation is a major concern for people preparing for retirement. Inflation never sleeps, it just keeps going. And it can make it more difficult for you to be able to afford your way of life in the future. No matter how much or how little you have, inflation impacts everyone. On the show today, we'll tell you why you shouldn't ignore inflation and how to combat it and live the retirement you've worked so hard for. Welcome, I'm Kelly Dame, joined now by Zach Gray, founder of Rooted Wealth Advisors. And Zach, always great to be back here with you.
Same to you, Kelly.
Now, when we're talking about inflation, can it be true that retirees are the ones that are really hit the hardest?
I really do think that way. And let's think about it in this way. As you work, Kelly, hopefully maybe over time you earn a little bit more money, or you might be expecting a raise from your employer. Well, now let's think about that from a retiree's perspective. You're on a fixed income. There's not those raises coming maybe each and every single year, or there's not an opportunity to advance, maybe earn more income. And so we have to really be looking at, well, what do we have saved? What are the strategies we're putting in place? Because yes, most definitely, I feel retirees can be hit the hardest of any of us.
We've got Social Security's cost of living adjustment. Does that help offset the costs at all?
It can. And I mean, we've seen it over the last several years now. If we think back over the last 2 or 3 years, well, we've had a really nice cost of living adjustment, or a COLA adjustment, we'd like to say, and it's giving a nice little boost to Social Security. But you have to keep in mind, Social Security was never created to take care of all of someone's income needs in retirement. It's only going to maybe be a portion of that. So if you start to think about the fact that maybe Social Security, Kelly, takes care of, I don't know, maybe a third of someone's income needs in retirement, well, you have to then think about the fact that even if we get a 2, 3, even a 7, 8% jump in that cost of living adjustment, is it really a big enough bite to take care of what we see with our expenses and what inflation's doing to us? So no doubt that it helps, but I'm not here to say that it's going to take care of all of our inflationary concerns by any means.
We see inflation just about everywhere we look, right? So the gas pump or at the grocery store when we buy that gallon of milk. So those constant increases, they just add up over time. Yeah. So let's talk about how it can really impact that lifestyle when we get to retirement.
Well, you're 100% right. It's everywhere that we turn that we're seeing inflation, especially over these last few years, right? I mean, ever since COVID, we've seen these inflationary numbers just be high, and everyone hopes and thinks that they're going to come down drastically. Sadly, it's just not what we're seeing. You know, it's the grocery store when I'm there with my wife and kids, it's the gas pump. And yeah, there's been some fluctuations of certain needs, but of course, we're seeing these costs be high over time. And so I think the question becomes, Kelly, what is the plan that we have to combat them? And I really think that that's the idea that we try to bring to life here at Rooted Wealth Advisors. What can we be doing to squeeze as much of our hard-earned money back into our own pockets and making sure that we have a plan that is built for inflation? Because as you mentioned earlier, Kelly, inflation's not going to stop. It's going to continue on. There's worse years, there's maybe a little bit better years, but it's going to continue to propel forward. And one of the ways that we see that is what we consider to be a tax reduction report. What are some ways to be as efficient with our hard-earned money? Because we need to make sure that it lasts.
It can feel so overwhelming. So it is great to know that there's a plan. So tell us more about this tax reduction report.
Sure. So this tax reduction report is something that our team puts a lot of time and energy into, and it's really a plan that's tailored to your unique situation. And you can make some best decisions with your hard-earned money. And I think it needs to happen now, Kelly, before taxes, they go up. And it's as simple as just picking up the phone and give us a call today. That number is 855-955-6868, and I'd love to step all of our viewers through it.
Well, that sounds absolutely amazing. So here is your chance to get your hands on this tax reduction report from Rooted Wealth Advisors. Call 855-955-6868 to secure yours today. It doesn't matter how much you save for retirement, inflation will take a piece of your pie. So let Rooted Wealth Advisors help make it the smallest slice possible. Remember, there's no cost or obligation. Once again, that number to reach them is 855-955-6868. Here's your chance for professional planning, helping keep what you've worked so hard for. Now, with inflation on the rise, it could spell trouble for your retirement. How can you keep it from impacting your purchasing power in retirement? Zach explains next.
Did you know taxes could be your biggest expense in retirement? No one can avoid taxes completely, but with the right strategies in place, you could potentially reduce your taxes in retirement. And reducing your taxes means more of your hard-earned money right back in your pocket. Call now for your free tax reduction report to uncover your future tax savings.
Inflation is cause for concern for many people preparing for retirement. So Zach, it is clear that inflation is real and could potentially stand in the way of our retirement dreams. So what is the best way to really plan for inflation?
Well, I think it is just that. Let's have a plan in place that we can go back to over time. And we need to be looking at where's our income going to come in from. And that could be maybe looking at a pension, Social Security. What do we need to be pulling from our investments? But one thing that I think is a critical miss, Kelly, is those that just don't factor in much when it comes to inflation, period. Now, of course, over the last couple of years, we've seen inflation be at some record high numbers. And so do I think that that's going to continue on? I hope not. But I do think we have to make sure that we're putting a plan in place for that. You know, we've talked about on the show before a written income plan. And a key part of that is making sure that we look at all scenarios. What do things look like if inflation's high? What about a year like 2022 that we just experienced not too long ago here in the rearview mirror, and all of a sudden the markets drop? So we have to be very realistic about, hey, we're going to have inflation moving forward. Are we making sure to put the plan in place for that? That written income plan is a great place to start, and of course that's a part of our rooted retirement process.
And when we're working, we have the raises, maybe those bonuses in our working years that can really help offset or maybe not make inflation hurt as much. So how do you help someone factor inflation into their spending plans when they don't get those raises and bonuses in retirement?
Well, you know, helping folks that are maybe coming out of the COVID time period, we've seen inflation be at this really massive rate that we haven't experienced for really 40 years. And so now it becomes this question of what are we doing to make sure to manage that? You mentioned this earlier in the fact of, well, I'm going to work, I'm expecting maybe a raise, or I could work a little bit more, but when we get into our senior years, are we really wanting to go back to work? Likely not. And we don't have those raises to offset, but guess what? We still have the expenses. The grocery store is still going to be maybe more costly for those in retirement as it is for those that are still working, of course, we know this. So what are we once again doing that we can make sure to plan for that? Because it is important that people take a look at what needs to be adjusted, what needs to be changed, how well are our investments doing? Because especially in retirement, we've got to rely heavily on those dollars that we've saved. We typically, Kelly, don't see pensions that are giving massive cost of living adjustment raises. We talked a little bit about Social Security in an earlier segment in terms of what does that look like? What will be changing with that over time? Of course, it's nice when they release, hey, we're going to get a nice little bump to this. However, that's not going to take care of all of the costs that we have, whether it's at the gas pump, whether it's at the grocery store, whether it's for travel.
So as we think about income sources that are out there, are there any income sources that are inflation proof? And better yet, can we make all of our income inflation proof?
You know, inflation proof might be a bit of a stretch. I mean, we have inflation, it's going to hit us at times and once again be a little bit more harsh in certain environments in certain years than others. What I would say is this, there are some things that we can be doing. I think number one, it's making sure that we look at a very well-diversified portfolio. You know, if we do see inflation, the real hope is that at least a sector of the market, if not maybe potentially the entire market, responds and will start to push upwards. But I think a well-diversified portfolio is critically important because once again, I touched on this earlier, and though it's here, you know, a year or two in the rearview mirror now, but 2022 is a great example. We saw record high inflation and we saw record high volatility. And so when you start to think about the fact of pulling more money from your investments, and Kelly, at one of a down year in the market, one of the worst times to be pulling from those investments, that's a problem. And so once again, I think that we have to be looking at how can we inflation-proof our savings or our retirement funds. And there are certain things, maybe you have an annuity that has a cost of living adjustment or a bit of a raise every single year. They can even be guaranteed for income. And there's pros and cons to that, but it could be something that could make some sense. Maybe even something like a real estate investment. You could have different REITs and different types of portfolio designs that, once again, if there's certain things that are moving upwards, they're typically tracking right along with. Those can be great assets to, once again, put in your portfolio and make sure that we're doing our best to defend against inflation.
We've been talking about it all starts with a plan. So how do we find the right help to put together a plan that protects against inflation and all of the other risks that we may have when it comes to our economy?
Well, I've been touching on that, and we started with the income plan, and we definitely need to check that box. Look at the investments. I just got done elaborating a little bit on some things that can maybe inflation-proof our portfolio. Taxes, that's one that we haven't really talked a lot about, and I think that that's a real key takeaway. In an environment that continues to be volatile, I think that that's a great takeaway is how can we keep more of our hard-earned money in our own pocketbook? And I'd love to do that for our viewers today with a tax reduction report. That's what we call it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about this report and what all it entails.
Absolutely. So while we can't necessarily, Kelly, control inflation, we can influence the amount of money that we have to spend. And that we can really keep in our own pocketbook. That's what I've been referencing. So we want to walk you through our entire rooted retirement process, maximizing income to combat this inflation that we've been chatting about, and also make sure that we include our very own tax reduction report. So when you call 855-955-6868, we're going to make sure that you have a conversation with one of our fiduciary advisors. We're going to get some real general information from you, and we're going to make sure to get that report in the hands of our viewers today.
And there, of course, is a lot of value there. So here is your chance to get your hands on this tax reduction report only from Rooted Wealth Advisors. Call 855-955-6868 to secure yours today. It doesn't matter if you've saved $500,000, $2 million, or $10 million or more for retirement. Don't miss this opportunity. Remember, there's no cost or obligation. Call 855-955-6868. Don't hesitate to dial it now. Up next, Zach has an economic lesson for you, inflation versus shrinkflation. Stay tuned for Digging Deep.
No one can avoid taxes completely, but with the right strategies in place, you could potentially reduce your taxes in retirement. When you take the time to put the right strategies in place, that means more of your hard-earned money stays in your pocket, not Uncle Sam's. Call Rooted Wealth Advisors now for your free tax reduction report and uncover your future tax savings.
You've heard of inflation, but shrinkflation? Zach explains where this can impact us all.
Thanks, Kelly. And yes, we're back here for my favorite segment. It's Digging Deep. And I can't wait to dig on in and talk a little bit about inflation. So, shrinkflation. That's maybe a word that you haven't heard a lot about. Let's start with inflation. So we of course know what inflation is. We've been experiencing it over the last 2 years at some very, very high rates. And inflation, of course, is just the cost of goods going up over the years. And as we start to look at different sectors or segments of some of these things that we need, we know that those costs are going up and up and up. And so gas prices, for example, is a great example. We saw inflation really hit them hard, but they have come back down some here in some recent months, and they're going to continue to fluctuate up and down based on a multitude of things. Groceries, though, on the other hand, I tell you, I share this story quite a bit. I just shared it on our podcast, and it was the idea of me going shopping with my family, and I went with my wife, Jenna, and our 4 kids. That in itself was an experience. But I tell you, by the time that we got to checking out, I really just was in awe of the costs there. And I know that 4 kids, some healthy food, those costs can be quite high. But I tell you what, in that moment, I just was really in unbelief of how high things had gone to. And it doesn't really feel like anything's softening there. It doesn't feel as if costs of maybe building goods and things of that nature are really dropping here in any recent times. So we know inflation definitely comes around and definitely over years is going to continue to push our cost higher and higher. And once again, there's going to be certain time frames, like coming out of COVID, for example, that we see these costs push extremely high. We might soften over time, but what we do know is if we look back really even over 100 years, we're seeing inflation run above 3%. And as we look back over the last 10 years, that number is close to 3% as well. So we have to be building a plan that takes care of this inflationary need that we need to be managing in our retirement years. Because once again, as we've talked about in the show today already, we have to be looking at this inflationary concern for retirees probably more than those that are in the workforce. Those that are in the workforce likely maybe have some raises that are going to take care of some of these needs. Maybe they have the opportunity just simply to work more or change positions, and that's not the case for those that are in that retirement stage of life. So shrinkflation, as we start to think about the idea of what that might look like, that's a term that is used to think about, well, let me start with that old candy bar that you might have got when you were out trick-or-treating. What I remember as a kid is the fact that they were pretty darn good size, even the fun-size candy bars. Well, now, as I go out trick-or-treating with my own children, what I notice in the bucket is something that's substantially smaller than what I remember as a kid. And as you start to think about shrinkflation, it doesn't just end with candy. You can start to see this across the board in sizes of maybe the pop bottles or water bottles that you might be drinking from. Also, as you start to think about other household goods, and maybe that's detergent that you need for your laundry or your dishes, even soap or shampoo bottles, and looking at the fact that, hey, I was accustomed to a certain size, but now I'm only getting a lesser product and really maybe for the same type of money. And I say that because that is something for everyone to kind of keep in mind or to be looking at. Obviously, it's just another way of which inflation can be hitting, because once again, it's just going to take more and more dollars to make sure that we're living our lifestyles. And of course, I've touched on some certain things like groceries and obviously gasoline, some other household items that are our day in, day out costs. What I haven't touched on are the really fun things that we expect to do in retirement and the things that we would maybe want to focus our time on. Maybe that's spoiling the grandkids. Maybe that's going for some travel. And as I start to think about those sectors of the market, those have been extremely high over the last few years, and we don't necessarily see ourselves being in a position that they've been dropping back down to some maybe pre-COVID low. Either way that we're looking at this, whether it's inflation that I described at the beginning or it's shrinkflation, which I just described, our money is just not stretching as far as what it used to. And once again, for retirees, that's extremely important. They're on a fixed income. And so if you're looking at this and you're nearing retirement or you're in your retirement years, this is something that needs to be tackled. We have to be thinking about how can we stretch our money as far as we possibly can. And I think that really starts with an income plan to tackle this concern of inflation, this concern that our money might not be stretching as far. Maybe it's because we have a little less product in the shampoo bottle, but what's important to note here is that we've got to take care of these day in, day out expenses. And of course, we want to have some fun in our golden years, no doubt. So I think that an inflation-driven income plan is extremely important for everyone watching today. Make sure that you are putting together an income plan, because without it, you really don't have a whole lot of retirement. And as we jokingly say, retirement without income, well, it's just not that great. You need to make sure that you're feeling comfortable about what those cash flows are that you have coming in. You need to be looking at all the different income sources that you have. What do you have coming from maybe a pension? How does that look? Will it go up over the years? What about Social Security? How much Social Security do you have coming in for both you and maybe a spouse if you happen to be married? Oh, and by the way, what happens if something tragic were to happen and one of those spouses leaves one of you widowed? That's extremely important. How do we make sure to stretch our hard-earned money as far as we possibly can? That's a key part of our rooted retirement process. And one way that you might not be thinking about that is taxes. You know, right now, taxes are at some historic low points. And as I start to take a look at our clients and any prospective clients that might be calling into the show or watching one of our advisor teams speak, I'm always wondering, hey, where does that money sit? And how can we maybe make more of someone's particular situation. I think that making sure that we get the tax situation right is critically important. And that is actually why we are offering to step you through our entire process and really hone in on our tax reduction report. Because it's our belief that if we can keep more of your hard-earned money in your own pocket instead of Uncle Sam's, well, that can be a great way to stretch those dollars and make sure to give a lot of confidence to your retirement picture. So what I would like to do for every single one watching today is to make that offer to you. It's free. It costs absolutely nothing to pick up the phone and give us a call today and have us step you through what I think one of the most missing pieces of most folks' retirement picture, and that is making sure to get that tax plan correct. That tax reduction report is something that you're only going to find at Rooted Wealth Advisors, and it's as simple as calling 855-955-6868. One of our fiduciary advisors will make sure to step you through that process, gather some basic information, and make sure to make the most of those hard-earned dollars. So once again, that's 855-955-6868. Kelly, back to you.
Thank you, Zach. Up next, get answers to your retirement questions in our Q&A segment. Stay tuned.
No one can avoid taxes completely, but with the right strategies in place, you could potentially reduce your taxes in retirement. When you take the time to put the right strategies in place, that means more of your hard-earned money stays in your pocket, not Uncle Sam's. Call Rooted Wealth Advisors now for your free tax reduction report and uncover your future tax savings. Did you know taxes could be your biggest expense in retirement? No one can avoid taxes completely, but with the right strategies in place, you could potentially reduce your taxes in retirement. And reducing your taxes means more of your hard-earned money right back in your pocket. Call now for your free tax reduction report to uncover your future tax savings.
It is now time to get to your questions. Zach, are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Well, this first question is from Chuck, and he writes, I'm worried about taxes when I retire. I've heard you mention using life insurance for tax-free income in retirement. Does that really work?
It can work. And so as I start to think about taxes and the different types of investments that we have, I think about it just really in three categories, almost in buckets, if you will. Taxable, that could be like a bank account, non-qualified account. Tax deferred, that's your traditional 401k, traditional IRA, the list goes on. Tax-free money, and there's really only kind of two types that are falling there. Something with the word Roth, IRA or 401k, or life insurance. And so life insurance can be a really great way to look at covering needs of most definitely what life insurance is built for, the case that someone passes. On top of that, there's a lot of great riders these days, Kelly, that might cover chronic or critical illness, kind of those long-term care type of costs that might be out there as well. And then on top of that, they can grow cash value at a very nice rate. We can use indexed products that grow as an indices rises. There are some variable products out there as well. So I would just say to all the listeners out there, there's some great ways to really equip yourself with life insurance, and it can be a great way that you can grow some tax-free dollars and then once again pull those dollars back out when you need them.
You mentioned a bit of a strategy around when people pass away, and that is exactly where our next question comes from Jim, where he says, my wife recently passed away, and I'm wondering if I need to think about being more conservative with my money. How do I figure out if there are better places for my money that keeps me from taking too much risk?
Well, I think that volatility or risk is definitely a conversation that has to happen, especially as you get near retirement or into your retirement years. And many folks just don't think about it sometimes until it's too late. And there's a bit of a backstory, but one of those that I got involved in the industry is because of that exact question. My grandmother had worked very hard, put away some money. Over the 90s, the market did very well. Back to exactly this question, Kelly, her husband at the time, second husband, a great guy, Harold, we called him Howie, he passes. And because of that, she starts to question, hey, wait a minute, am I taking too much risk? Because now all of a sudden his pension changed. his Social Security was gone, and there was so much more pressure back to the way that they had their investments put together. So I think it's critically important that everyone at any stage, and it doesn't have to be, and frankly maybe shouldn't be when a spouse passes away, though that's a great time to take a second look. I do think it's important for everyone to have a great understanding. What type of risk am I taking with my hard-earned money? Does that make sense for me? Because everyone has a different stomach, if you will, for the ups and downs, as well as the fact that the size of a portfolio, the amount of income coming in from different sources, all of that, Kelly, can really drive us in terms of how much should we be taking, how much risk or volatility should we have in the portfolio.
Well, another question from Cheryl. My husband and I would like to retire in the next 5 years, but aren't sure when's the best time to start taking our Social Security. Can you help with that?
Most definitely. You know, it's a key piece of our rooted retirement process, Cheryl, and I do think that it's important for everyone to look at that. Sometimes, Kelly, we're under this misnomer that we should all wait until the age of 70 to take our highest Social Security. And while that could work for some of our viewers out there, I will tell you that more times than not, we don't think that that is the most efficient. Sometimes even the more wealthy someone might be, actually the earlier they should take Social Security. And as you start to think about a spousal couple, now it's a question of Kelly and her husband. What does that look like for the both of you? Because now all of a sudden, there's a whole nother set of rules, or at least options, that you get to choose from as you start to think about, well, do I take mine? Or is there a spousal benefit? And there's just so many ways in which we can utilize that hard-earned money. And I think that's really, really important as we start to think through an entire plan. And I really can't emphasize this enough. You know, my team and I are committed, and we're really passionate about helping people with their retirement plans. And that's actually why we've put together one of our best resources. We've talked a lot about it on the show today, but it's our tax reduction report. And in this free offer, we would like to give away to our viewers today an opportunity to chat with one of our fiduciary advisors on the team and really take the steps of looking at, am I maximizing all of this hard-earned money? And so this tax reduction report can only be found at Rooted Wealth Advisors. We're inviting all of you watching to step through it, and we would love to get it in the hands of everyone out there watching today. It's as simple as calling 855-955-6868. So to get started, that number one last time is 855-955-6868.
Write that down. There is a lot of valuable information in having your own tax reduction report. So here's your chance to get your hands on your very own tax reduction report from Rooted Wealth Advisors. Again, call 855-955-6868 to get yours today. Remember, there is no cost or obligation, so don't wait. Call 855-955-6868. For Zach and the team at Rooted Wealth Advisors, I'm Kelly Dame, wishing you a happy retirement. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.